They said he owned the world. But there were people he owned more completely than land. People with names erased. Voices silenced. Lives reduced to property beneath the boots of the great Khan. And what he did to them was meant to terrify the living long after they were gone. The wind howled across the Mongol steppe like a restless spirit. Tents of felt and leather stood against the darkness. Horses stamped the frozen earth. Torches flickered like watchful eyes in the night. At the center of the camp rose the great pavilion of Genghis Khan. Inside, warmth, silence, and a judgment about to be delivered. Bound outside the pavilion were 50 captives. Men and women taken from a conquered city far to the west. Their wrists raw from rope. Their lips cracked from thirst. They had once been scholars, artisans, mothers, sons. Now, they were slaves of the Khan. But tonight, they were something else. An example. A guard pulled one of them forward. A young man, no older than 20. His face still carried the dust of the ruins he had been dragged from. He had tried to run. He had tried to flee across the plains at dusk. No one escaped the Khan. No one. He was forced to his knees before the entrance. The felt curtain lifted. A single figure stepped out. Wrapped in furs. Eyes dark as a moonless sky. The Khan said nothing. He did not need to. A commander whispered the young man's crime. Attempted escape. The Khan looked at the prisoner for a long time. Long enough for the wind to stop feeling cold. Long enough for the camp to fall silent. Then he gave an order. Quiet. Almost gentle. The young man was dragged away. Not to be killed. Not yet. And that is when the other slaves began to tremble. Because death would have been mercy. Behind the camp, a pit had already been dug. Deep. Wide. Black as the mouth of the underworld. The 50 captives were forced to stand around it. They did not know why. They would soon understand. The young man was brought back. But now, he was bound inside a wooden frame. Unable to move. Unable to fall. A Mongol soldier stepped forward with a bucket. Not water. Not food. Grain. The grain was poured over the prisoner's head. Into his mouth. Over his shoulders. The captives watched in confusion. Then the rats were released. Hundreds of them. Starved. Screeching. Wild with hunger. They swarmed the man. And the screams began. The Khan did not watch. He did not need to. He had done this before. The point was not the punishment. The point was the message. You do not belong to yourself. You belong to me. The screams echoed across the steppe long into the night. No one slept. And as the screams faded, the slaves realized the horror was not over. Because the pit had not yet been used. Morning came gray and merciless. The rats were gone. The wooden frame lay broken. What remained of the young man was unrecognizable. The Khan emerged again. He walked to the edge of the pit. Looked down. Then turned to the captives. And spoke for the first time. You will fill it. A murmur of confusion rippled through them. A translator stepped forward. You will build a living floor. The slaves were forced into the pit. Layer by layer. Pressed against one another. Standing shoulder to shoulder. No room to sit. No room to fall. More captives were brought from other camps. More slaves. More bodies. Hundreds of them. Packed inside. Then the earth began to fall. Dirt. Soil. Shovelfuls raining down from above. They screamed. They begged. They prayed. But the dirt did not stop. The pit slowly filled. A mound rose where living people had stood. The Khan mounted his horse. Rode across the mound. Once. Twice. To pack the soil firm. A road, the commander said. A road built from disobedience. The Mongol army would march over it for days. And none would ever know what lay beneath their hooves. But even this was not the punishment that terrified the slaves most. What truly broke them was what the Khan did next. Weeks later, the army reached another conquered city. Stone walls blackened from fire. Air thick with the smell of ash. The surviving population was herded into the square. Among them, dozens chosen for slavery. They were told they would serve the Khan's household. A privilege, the guard said. They were washed. Fed. Given new clothes. Hope flickered in their eyes. But they did not understand the Khan's mind. These slaves were not for labor. They were for a lesson. That night, the slaves were brought into the Khan's pavilion. A long table stood at the center. Food piled high. Meat. Bread. Fermented mare's milk. They were told to eat. And they did. Greedily. Desperately. They had been starving for weeks. They did not notice the soldiers sealing the tent. They did not notice the braziers being brought in. Burning charcoal. More and more. The air grew thick. Heavy. Hard to breathe. Some began to cough. Some tried to stand. The exits were blocked. The Khan sat outside the tent. Listening. Not watching. Listening. To the slow, fading struggle inside. By morning, the tent was silent. The bodies were removed. Laid in a row. The remaining slaves were forced to look upon them. A commander spoke. The Khan is merciful. He fed them before they died. The message was clear. You will receive kindness. And you will never know when it becomes death. But the darkest secret of all was not how he punished slaves. It was how he used them to destroy cities without lifting a sword. When the Mongol army approached fortified cities, they did not always attack first. Instead, slaves were driven forward. Hundreds of them. Given tools. Forced to build siege engines under enemy fire. Arrows rained down from the walls. The slaves had no shields. No protection. They fell by the dozens. But they could not run. Mongol archers stood behind them. Anyone who tried to flee was shot in the back. The defenders watched in horror. They hesitated. They did not want to kill their own people. Their former neighbors. Their countrymen. And in that hesitation, the Mongols moved closer. By the time the siege towers were ready, the defenders were already broken in spirit. The slaves had become living shields. Living sacrifices. Weapons made of flesh. And when the city finally fell, the Khan would walk through the gates without resistance. Because the people inside had already witnessed what awaited them. The slaves who survived these ordeals no longer spoke. They no longer cried. They no longer dreamed of escape. They understood the truth. Death was not the Khan's greatest weapon. Fear was. Fear that crawled into the mind and lived there forever. Fear that turned men into obedience. Fear that turned cities into dust before a battle even began. Years later, travelers would cross the plains of Asia. They would ride over strange mounds in the earth. Hard. Flattened. Like ancient roads. They never knew why the ground felt so firm. They never knew what lay beneath. But the wind remembered. The steppe remembered. And perhaps, the earth itself remembered. Because beneath those roads were the forgotten slaves of Genghis Khan. And the world he conquered was built not only on war, but on terror so deep that even the dead were made to obey.